You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Fast ship. Never heard of the William Paul?
Never should I have.
That's the ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
What a piece of junk.
Covering Star Wars vehicles in less than 12 parsecs, this is Start Your Engines.
Don't get technical with me.
Here are your hosts, Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold.
You're listening to Start Your Engines. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today in the cockpit is
Paul Naylor.
There you go. I can just edit that in every day. You say it exactly the same.
Well, I'm not going to change my name.
Well, that's true. That's true. We've got a bumper episode today. We are going to talk about the vehicles of Shadows of the Empire. It's the 1996 multimedia blast from Lucasfilm that was basically everything but the movie, wasn't it?
It was a unique, fascinatingly sort of approached venture. The only thing it really missed was the film. We had a great video game. We had great toys. Comic strips,
Trading cards,
yeah, the trading cards.
That Joel McNeely soundtrack,
yeah, the almost bubble bath type sort of statues,
yeah,
everything but a film.
It's one of those eras of Star Wars that is often forgotten. The 90s are the lost decade of Star Wars, certainly in terms of the toys. With Shadows, one of the key things was tying in with everything that was happening in the story was the toys. Yeah. And there's this great range. There's a few here, there's a few bits dotted around, but there's that great range of Kenner Hasbro stuff that came out. The Outrider, Swoops. Yeah. I think Ertl did a Virago.
Certainly some micro machines.
There was a great set of micro machines.
Yeah, but the action figures themselves were great. I think before I knew too much about what Shadows was going to be, one of the first images I saw was Chewbacca.
Yes,
as his bounty hunter with his flat top with his flat top hair, and I think got an eye patch and different stuff. Yep. Chewie, what's going on here, mate? But yeah, it was fascinating from the off. I think the problem that they were considering was because of the time it was set. There's no Han Solo, which is obviously the slot that Dash Rendar fills.
Yeah,
but I think they were quite hesitant to do anything in that time frame. The Marvel comics between Empire and Jedi felt sometimes a little bit isolated.
I think looking back at interviews from the day, I interviewed Jo Duffy years ago, the editor at the time, and she said they were kind of constricted and would come up with ideas, and one of the ideas that they came up with was basically a second Death Star. Yeah. And without saying, no, you can't do that because we're doing that, Lucasfilm were like, we'd rather you didn't do that. You know,
a second Death Star, as if.
Yeah, who'd do that? So yeah, you're right. They were sort of constricted. My favourite era in all of Star Wars is that Empire to Jedi run. Yeah. Because the anticipation was insane.
I think I can enjoy it more now.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of Star Wars content. I can enjoy the low points once I've had another high point that follows it. So it's a little bit like, it's already well documented, my love-hate relationship with The Last Jedi. I can appreciate it more since Rise of Skywalker came out because it kind of fixed some of the issues that I had with it. But also it was more of an up ending than The Last Jedi was. But in terms of Shadows of the Empire, I suppose Star Wars really made a big comeback with the Timothy Zahn books, which was
91.
We'd been almost Star Wars-less, apart from a few bits and bobs, West End games and other things, for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So when Star Wars started creeping back into the consciousness, the Zahn books was like the first wave of it. And I suppose the second wave, really, for me anyway, would be when Hasbro re-released the original Star Wars figures. Not re-released, they sort of reimagined them as He-Man.
Yes.
Yeah, the bulked out ones. And I think that was when Star Wars magazine sort of launched around the same sort of time, 95.
In the UK, it was.
It had been Insider in the States for a while. But then one of the first big projects, it's almost like they're dipping their toes in the water, isn't it? Out comes Shadows. And we know that we've got the enhanced versions, the special editions of Star Wars Empire and Jedi to look forward to. But this was like new content. It was just a treat.
It's really hard now where we are in Star Wars with new content coming all the time. And not only comics and books, but live action and animation. To think back to an era when you'd got novels coming out 2 or 3 times a year. Yeah. Sometimes in paperback you'd get trilogies, Jedi Academy, Corellian trilogy, all that sort of stuff. Black Fleet Crisis, all that era of Star Wars. But also, of course, you'd got Dark Horse doing stuff, who kind of kicked it off pretty much at the same time as Del Rey and Heir to the Empire, or Bantam as it was in the UK. So we weren't completely starved, but there wasn't that much stuff.
No.
But to have something set between Empire and Jedi which was an era that we never really thought we'd dip back into. Wow, what a treat that was.
And I think back in the day, we could measure our consumption of Star Wars in a number of ways. We knew that we get a film every 3 years.
Yeah.
And that was the case as well when the prequels came out as well, 99 onwards. Certainly when we were little uns, you could measure the waves of action figures coming in.
Not that we even thought of it as waves as kids, did we?
Just, more figures. It seemed to come from nowhere as well,
Yeah.
Shadows. I don't remember there being much lead up to it. It was just, boom, here it is.
Probably Insider was the place where you would have picked up stuff before, and I'm trying to remember the chronology of it now, whether or not Galaxy magazine was out at that time. I'm pretty sure it would have been. So Star Wars Galaxy Mag would have been going from Tops. You'd have had your Dark Horse stuff. There would have been novels. There would have been Insider, which you had to order from the States at that point.
Yeah.
So not a huge amount of outlets, and certainly 96 is the year that StarWars.com started. So there was fan sites out there. The ForceNet was out there in a slightly different form.
Yeah.
There were other sites, not that many, but you are talking pushing 30 years ago now. So the word was sort of bobbling around. As we say, the excitement, the thought that you were getting everything except the film, that was tempered by the fact that, as you say, we got the special edition coming. It was just A New Hope, and then I think the success and the way that worked made them want to do Empire and Jedi. And of course, not that far down the road, because we knew it was coming by this point, the prequel trilogy, so we knew that there was plenty of Star Wars content to come. But we're here today to talk about the vehicles of Star Wars Shadows of the Empire.
That's the most prolonged intro to this we've ever done.
I know.
Well done.
Thank you. Let's kick off with the first vehicle, the Virago. So this was the vehicle of Prince Shizor.
I didn't know that was how you pronounce his name.
I
Prince
think,
Zyza for me
you
for
can
ages.
say it however you want to say it.
No, you say how it's supposed to
It's
be
a
said.
free executor, AT-AT. You can say it however you want.
Manufacturer.
This was a Mandel Motors, they were the manufacturer. It was a modified Star Viper class attack platform. So
Of course it was.
Pretty hefty looking vehicle. Design-wise, beautiful, sort of opened up like a petal. A very, very deadly petal, but a petal nonetheless.
Technical specifications.
21 metres in length. It was 4240G at top speed. MGLT of 110 MGLT. So that is very, very, very fast.
Maximum atmospheric speed.
880 kilometres an hour, which when you compare it to 30 kilometres an hour for a sandcrawler, is pretty fast.
Very fast indeed.
Engine specs.
Quadex IGT engines, a Cursonar N2F micro thrusters. So basically, it could turn on a dime.
Hyperdrive system.
It had a Class 1 hyperdrive and a Class 10 backup. Always handy to have a backup because those hyperdrives, as we know in Star Wars, have a tendency to drop out a lot. And it had heavy power generators, one per wing. So as you think of the vehicle, looking at the vehicle, that chrome white paint job on it, the four wings sort of arching back, very distinct design, power generators for each one. So this thing could pack a punch.
Be great to see it in live action, wouldn't it?
It really, really would. And hopefully somebody somewhere's had thoughts of that, because that's a vehicle I would love to see moving around. It had forward and aft deflector shield generators. And as for a targeting system, Carbanti ST2X targeting computer with experimental laser sighting system. So it's a vehicle it's tricked out. It's got stuff that no other vehicle's got. You think of the Falcon. The Falcon's got mods to it. It's got a military grade sensor suite. There's all these little things that they try.
Yeah.
Here's a vehicle that, in its way, feels as experimental to Prince Shizor as Darth Vader's X1 TIE fighter was to him.
Yeah, it's something that's been purpose built.
Weapons systems.
It had Tamerback HT-212 heavy laser cannons, 2 of those, Borstel proton torpedo launcher, so it carries proton torpedoes, so it can definitely pack a punch, and it carries a standard load of 3 torpedoes. So it's got 2 launchers with 3 torpedoes each, so it can shoot out 6 torpedoes.
Crew complement.
1 pilot, 1-man gig.
Cargo capacity.
It can carry 1 metric ton, which isn't a huge amount, but probably enough for the vehicle of its type.
Yeah.
2 months consumables, which is quite a lot for most vehicles. 2 months is pretty hefty. So, again, I think that speaks to Shizor's requirements and what he would need from a vehicle.
Model and class.
It's a heavy assault fighter, a space superiority fighter, so it is definitely a fighter class vehicle. And it was destroyed during the events of Shadows of the Empire.
Hello, my name is Aidan Cook, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So the next vehicle from Shadows that we're going to have a look at, the Hound's Tooth, it was Bosk's ship.
Model and class.
It was a Corellian Engineering Corporation vehicle, a modified VY666 light freighter. I wonder if when they named it 666, they're kind of going for a vibe there, aren't they?
I think you might be right.
It's a space transport, not for sale, 480,000 credits. That is not cheap.
Technical specifications.
It's 62 metres in length, has a maximum acceleration of 2360G.
Maximum atmospheric speed.
1,190 kilometres per hour. So, again, very, very fast.
Hyperdrive system.
1.5 hyperdrive rating, 0.6 backup. So this is a vehicle that Bosch uses. It's got some heft to it. It's more sizable than you think. You mentioned on a previous episode the mini rigs.
Yeah.
And of course, you think of Bosch, you think Cap 2, don't you?
You do. Is Cap 2 stowed in the back of this?
I don't know. It should be.
That's what they should do.
It would be amazing if it was.
That's a way to introduce a mini rig, isn't it? Introduce 2 for 1. Let's get Houndstooth out there and let's get Cap 2. That'd be fantastic.
It would. It would be fantastic.
So was this the first appearance of Houndstooth?
I believe it was.
Hyperdrive system.
Yeah, it's a hyperdrive system and shielding, reinforced armour and a navigation system.
Weapons systems.
Pretty well packed. It's got a retractable quad laser cannon turret, 1 ion cannon and 1 concussion missile launcher. You made an observation earlier about what it kind of looks like.
It looks like Ray's Speeder.
It definitely has that about it. It's definitely got that about it. If that was to scale,
yeah,
it looks like Ray could hop on the back of that and ride it.
It looks like somebody's ploughed a Spitfire Model Air kit into the back of Ray's Speeder and said, that'll do.
Escape craft.
You mentioned Cap 2. It does have a complement, a scout ship called the Nashtapuk. Maybe. Let's call it Cap 2. Let's just call it Cap 2.
Crew complement.
1 pilot and 1 integrated X-10D droid brain. So only needs 1 pilot, but it can carry 4 passengers.
Cargo capacity.
20 metric tons. Compare that to Shizor's vehicle, the Virago, which had 1 ton, but was nowhere near as big.
Consumables.
6 months consumables, and it was present for the mission to Coruscant and the mission to Lamabu 3.
You look at Slave 1 alongside Boba Fett, and you can see, yes, that would be Boba Fett's ship. That isn't what would come to mind if you were going to draw a ship to go with Bosk. It wouldn't be something as sleek as that. It would be something a bit more muscle-bound.
It's an interesting observation, though, because the Falcon was the first cool ship we ever saw, really. Yeah. You can't not think of Han and the Falcon or Chewie and the Falcon. But in terms of design, Slave 1 and Boba Fett are such the perfect fit. Yeah. It is hard to imagine one without the other, or Django, of course, retroactively. Yeah. But with this vehicle, I mean, it was present at the space battle at Carida and the bombing of the Kuat shipyards in the event of Shadows of the Empire, and it was affiliated with the Bounty Hunters Guild and the Zarn Consortium. Bosk, he uses this vehicle quite heavily during the events of Shadows, and it is a ship that we've seen in the Bounty Hunters comic as well. It is still a vehicle that's used even today, sort of, where are we now? 27 years on from its creation.
I need to get into those Bounty Hunters comics.
You do.
Behind the scenes.
We are currently looking at the Fantasy Flight Games miniature version of the Houndstooth.
Which is a brilliant version of it, isn't it?
It's a gorgeous version for the first iteration of Star Wars X-Wing. Fantasy Flight did such a great job with these vehicles. They're beautiful just as collectibles, let alone playing pieces.
But true to form, yours is sort of vac-packed, never out of the box.
What are you trying to say?
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Model and class.
Corellian Engineering Corporation ship, a modified YT 2400 light freighter. So the Outrider, it's a classic ship. We have another one in hand here from those wonderful people at Fantasy Flight Games. Beautiful, beautiful design. Very evocative of the Falcon's sort of main body.
Beautiful ship.
And tweaked. Yeah. When you first saw this vehicle, it's exactly as you said. Dash Rendar kind of fills in a sort of, not the same role, but a sort of smuggler role in a fast Corellian ship that Han Solo would have done if the story had included him. And of course, the story wouldn't make sense if it included Han Solo because he's him in his coffee table form.
Popsicle.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of integral to it. It's a gorgeous ship, isn't it?
It's beautiful. The design of it is, right, draw me another version of the Millennium Falcon. Yeah. It's basically that, isn't it? I mean, the cockpit is almost a direct rip-off, shall we say, of it. There's 6 circular discs on top of the Falcon. The ones that look like solar panels, there's 3 on this in the same sort of configuration. And it just looks like somebody has gone, this is the Millennium Falcon Mark II. It's beautiful.
The good thing about the YT-1300, and we see in Solo, we learn in Solo that Han's father worked on the assembly line on Corellia, that they made these vehicles to be as malleable and as changeable as you possibly could make them. So by the same token, when you look at all the different configurations of the YT-1300, and there was loads in fandom, and there was loads in like pre-canon, and then you look at a vehicle like the YT-2400.
It's an evolution of the line of YTs.
And they've got a house style, haven't they?
Yes, they have. Who could not love this?
Technical specifications.
21 metres in length, 26.7 metres in width. Its layout is quite different to the Falcon. If you look at the shape of it, you feel like the mandibles facing the other way. It's as if the engines have been
on the mandibles, isn't it?
It's like the engines have been shifted around 45 degrees to another side. So it gives it a different sort of perspective, a different angle, which is really, really interesting to look at.
Maximum atmospheric speed.
Maximum acceleration, 2860G, MGLT of 70 MGLT, so that's a fast ship, and a maximum speed in atmosphere of 1,150 kilometres an hour. So, of course, it's slightly smaller than the Falcon, pretty much as fast. It's got some heft to it. It's a powerful ship.
Engine specs.
It has 3 Congar KG Defender iron engines,
Hyperdrive system.
a Sorosub Griffin Y2 TJ hyperdrive unit. It's got a Class 75 hyperdrive with a backup of 8, which is great to get you out of a bind if you're in such a situation. When you saw this ship again, first impressions are everything. It's such a cool looking vehicle. When it rocked up in the special edition, we saw it briefly flying out of Mos Eisley. What were your thoughts when you saw it there?
Massive grin on my face, I think.
It felt like it was ages after Shadows came out, but it was a year.
It was a year.
It was 1 year.
You're right. Back then, that did feel like a huge gap. I think it's probably because we are getting content all the time now. Everything's blurred. And it was done quite subtly as well. It wasn't sort of like, here it is. It was like, if you spotted it, you spotted it.
That's the best kind of Easter egg, though, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a bit like when they put the YT-1300 into the prequels.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Just at the bottom of the frame, and George confirmed that was the Falcon, which I always love.
Hull.
It has power-boosted shield generators. It has a reinforced titanium hull. That always makes me smile. To use titanium, and there's other sort of Star Wars metals that they've mentioned. Yeah. They do call it titanium. I think that speaks more to the era that the story was written. Yeah. When we've had other sort of Star Wars alloys designed since then.
Sensor systems.
It had a military-grade sensor suite, which is very much like the Falcon. The Brian Daly Han Solo trilogy mentions that he'd had an upgrade, a really sensitive pick ships up on the edge of the system type gimmick. And targeting systems, it had a Sinai Fleet Systems combat computer. That's not an off-the-shelf piece of kit. So Dash Rendar knows exactly what he's doing when he's tricking this ship out. He's loading it with all the cool stuff, isn't he?
It's been modified the way that you would imagine Han would have gone about it as well.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Countermeasures.
Enhanced sensor countermeasure package, Imperial Stealth sensor coating. So it's built to have sensors bounce off it. It doesn't want to be picked up. Doesn't mention a fake transponder system. Hopefully you'd think that all the other armament and countermeasures it's got would be enough. And that countermeasure package doesn't exactly explain what it is, but you've got to think back to Slave 1 in Attack of the Clones and wonder whether or not it's got some of the kit that Jango had on his.
Yeah. Was it built around the same time?
There's no detail on when it was built, but it looks like a ship that's done some miles.
It's got that used vibe to it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That trustworthy Star Wars style.
Now we've seen Solo: A Star Wars Story, and we know what a brand new YT-1300 pretty much looks like.
That's definitely not a brand new YT-2400.
No, it is not.
Weapons systems.
It has 2 Dimec heavy dual laser cannon turrets, 2 concussion missile tubes, and loads 3 missiles into each of those 2 tubes. So it can carry 2 tubes. It can carry 6 concussion missiles, which is pretty hefty for a vehicle, certainly of that size.
Crew complement.
Needs 1 pilot, a co-pilot, 2 gunners, and a minimum crew of 1. So pretty much the same as the Falcon. I mean, you would hope, and it's often a thought when Han Solo and Chewie go out on a smuggling mission, that we only see the events where things go wrong. We rarely see the jobs and missions where things go right.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of fan fiction and always made the point in there that whenever my character Yan used to get in trouble with the boss, he's like, 98 runs I do, everything goes smooth, I don't hear a whisper. The 2 jobs when things go wrong and I hear nothing
it's just
but
like
trouble.
The real world when you're at work.
Isn't it? It is so like the real world. 6 passengers, so it can, obviously there's a capacity to have guests on board the vehicle.
Cargo capacity.
150 metric tons, which is pretty hefty. That cargo hold size compared to the cockpit and the rest of the probably where you'd imagine the sleeping quarters would be.
Consumables.
2 months consumables. It has an escape pod as well.
Major engagements.
It was present at the Battle of Hoth. If you remember playing Shadows on the N64, you remember that.
Yes, of course, yes.
The Battle of Gaul, which you hear the soundtrack, the John McNeely soundtrack, you hear the music for there. The raid on the Saprosa, and of course the final battle over Coruscant.
Owners.
Vanya, and of course Dash Rendar. I think that's a vehicle that we should have seen more of.
I hope it's a vehicle we see again.
Because I would love to see that flying alongside the Ghost and the Fall at some juncture.
Even if it's not the same ship, it wouldn't have been the only one that was made. It's a YT-2400.
It's an off-the-line.
So let's see some other YT-2400s. It doesn't have to be the ship.
So, final summarisation. Shadows of the Empire, I think we both agree, it was a special moment for Star Wars projects as a Star Wars fan back in the 90s. It stands out as a point of time where Steve Perry does the novel, The Making of Shadows comes out. You see all the designs that they accumulated to put that all together. The Hasbro Kenner stuff that came out, the Galoob, the Micro Machine stuff you mentioned, the soundtrack, the game, the N64 game, which was huge. The vehicles we've discussed today are all very central to that. Yeah. And there are other vehicles, of course. You know, Vader's in it with his Star Destroyers, and there are other vehicles.
The swoop bikes.
The swoops, Big Giz and his swoop gang. But for the vehicles that we've talked about, if you had to pick one off the line and go, that's the baby I'm taking home, would it be the Virago, the Houndstooth, or the Outrider?
Outrider. Every time.
Yeah, can't argue.
It's just so evocative of the Falcon. You look at the others, you wouldn't say Star Wars straight away. You look at that, boom, you're there, aren't you? It was very different times, the late 90s. Things were more drip-fed, and what was relatively a short period of time felt longer.
Very much.
These days we've got content. There's always something new coming out. Felt like it was around for ages, but it was probably in reality about 7-8 months.
Probably was, and if you were a Focus collector, and clearly we're in my collecting room, I am not a Focus collector. I've got all sorts of...
Well, your Focus is Star Wars.
Well, I guess I am a
anything.
But if you wanted to pick a project, if you wanted to pick a film, modern times, you'd go, maybe Solo would be a good one, because there's not a huge amount of Solo products out there. But if you want to go back in the day, go back to Shadows.
With Shadows, it's even more concentrated. I think there's maybe 10 loose figures. Yeah. There's a couple of double packs.
That's right. A couple of
vehicles. You can buy the Outrider. You can buy the Swoop.
You could buy Slave 1 in the Shadows box.
Slave 1 in the Shadows box. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Start Your Engines. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com and be sure to comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fanthatracks. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fanthatracks intro, and our Start Your Engines opening music, Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers, and of course the data miners at Wikipedia. Remember to tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK time, 4 PM Eastern and 1 PM Pacific on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation. It's every Friday night at 7 o'clock UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks, and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.